Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the International Irradiation Association, or the IIA. My name is Arthur Dumba, and I am the General Manager of the IIA. I'll be your host today. We are happy to have presenters and attendees from around the world joining us, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here. A particular welcome to IIA members joining us today. Your support makes this event possible. All IIA activities, including webinars, are funded through membership. The International Irradiation Association is a not-for-profit organization that supports global irradiation industry across all technologies, applications, and sectors. It promotes the safe and beneficial use of irradiation by connecting science, industry, and stakeholders worldwide, and by communicating, educating, and advocating on behalf of the irradiation community. IIA activities include publications, webinars, and work groups, which provide access to technical resources, collaboration and networking opportunities, industry visibility, and participation in topical working groups that share knowledge and international experiences are all part of the benefits of joining the IIA. If you have any queries and would like to become a member, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@iiaglobal.com. Today's webinar is titled A New Era of Sterility Assurance, and we are joined by two expert presenters, Kimberly Patton, Sterilization Technologies Lead Engineering and Auditor at MedAccred, and Justin McCabe, Operations and Business Development Manager at MedAccred. They will be sharing MedAccred's profound role in radiation sterilization, global supplier oversight, and some pivotal regulatory updates. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. The webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be shared with all participants shortly after the webinar is over. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A function at the top of this screen. We'll have a dedicated session for questions in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the webinar. We will endeavor to answer all of your questions, but if we run out of time, we will circulate unanswered questions at a later date. The chat function has been turned off for this webinar, so please make sure to direct questions to the Q&A tab. I would now like to hand over to Kimberly Patton to start the webinar.
All right. Thank you, Arthur. And thank you for the introduction and to the IIA for the opportunity to do this webinar. And for all of those attending, I hope you have an opportunity to either learn something or have a key takeaway from our presentation today. All right, so we will jump right in to the agenda. So next slide. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today. What's new in radiation and also shifting the paradigm, and then what's new at MedAccred and also shifting the paradigm. We'll follow that up with just a bit of regulatory support for MedAccred, a call to action to participate, what's next, and then Q&A. Next slide. So what's new in radiation? I'm going to talk about a few things here. Changes in the revised 11137 Part 1. So I'll go through some of those changes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about parametric release for radiation and supporting documents for that. And finally, the status of 11137 Part 2. So, but first I wanted to define a paradigm shift. It's a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. So not just a change, but it's fundamental in approach. And then as well, I wanted to define a parametric. Parametric is relating to or expressed in terms of parameter or parameters. All right, so with that in mind, moving along to the next slide, changes in part 1. So there's some new normative references, but I specifically wanted to call out the ASTM 52628, standard practice for dosimetry and radiation processing. So the content processes for dosimetry meeting the requirements of ASTM 52628 shall be specified. So everyone needs to maybe spend some time on that document and be prepared with that new normative reference. B here is activation limits have been modified for X-ray and E-beam from 5 and 10 MeV to 7.5 and 11 respectively. So this could potentially result in more products that can be treated with E-beam and X-ray. So we'll see more to come on that. C is a means shall be provided to ensure that a failure in a control function does not lead to a failure in recording of process parameters such that an ineffective process appears effective. And so this is a very important addition here. And to avoid this, you must decouple control systems from monitoring and recording systems, looking at things like the physical and logical independence, assuring they don't have the same components, so separate sensors, independent data paths, and power supplies. Also looking at redundancy and logic. If a single sensor fails, which one is telling the truth? So 2 out of 3 logic can be used where you have 3 sensors that the system can compare readings. And then also system validation and calibration obviously are very important parts of that for a robust system. And then going along with that too, software used to control and monitor the process shall be validated. Moving on to E, requirements clarified to define the relationship between process parameters and dose. So again, that is setting up for parametric release. Next slide. All right. E is requirement clarified to define the relationship between process parameters and dose. And again, setting us up for parametric release. And then the term VD-Max SD is now used exclusively to include all VD-Max dose substantiations. So everything, all the doses from part 2 and also from 13004 are now referenced, providing support for VD-Max doses other than 15 and 25 that have been in the standard for so many years. So giving legitimacy to those other doses so that they can be used if they're more appropriate for your product. Transference of a verification dose or a sterilization dose to a radiation source different from that on which the dose was originally established is permitted, provided the product cannot support microbial growth. So this is giving the opportunity to change to a different source, and you don't have to do anything to document or test for that. The standard now allows that change provided there's no support for microbial growth in the product. Change throughout from location to zone when referring to areas of min and max dose. Also note added to allow use of simulated or surrogate material for PQ, but the must be similar to the product under qualification. Going to next slide, I believe. The process spec now calls out the need to document in the process spec the method and frequency of routine process monitoring. Also, actions to be taken if there's process interruptions, and added material within the container, such as we talked about before, if additional material has to be added, that is included in the process spec. Increased flexibility in dose audit intervals from 3 months to 4 months, with a minimum of 4 dose audits occurring annually. So this change, again, you're still required to do the 4 dose audits. So it's a 3-month interval, but you're given until that 4th month to get that done, giving flexibility for planning and scheduling. So beneficial change there. We've also incorporated content on product adoption that was previously in the AAMI TIR 35 document. Some of that content has also been clarified and modified as well. So a lot of good detail there. And then previous requirement was for a dosimeter to be placed or shall be placed at the routine monitoring position. Now the requirement is for a method for routinely monitoring the process, including the dose delivered, shall be specified, and measurements shall be recorded and analyzed against defined criteria. Again, this is getting us into a position to be able to use parametric release. Okay, next slide. All right, so changing gears here to talking a little more about parametric release. So we talked about the changes to part 1, and a lot of those changes do set us up for parametric. There's also some in part 4, there's some guidance on process control, which is a very important part of parametric release. AAMI TIR 131 is a document that's in draft right now called Parametric Release for Radiation Sterilization. And then there is also a radiation panel document. It's a guidance document called Released from an Electron Beam Irradiation Process based on irradiated parameters. They're calling it RBIP, and it's an introductory guidance. And then finally, ASTM E61 has some guidance documents with multiple test method approaches to set up a robust process. Okay, and some of those documents are still in draft and being drafted. ASTM E3270 and E3264 have been published, OQ for gamma and PQ for gamma. So the ASTM documents are working in order to be complementary to ISO requirements, meant to be usable and auditable, and again, help provide a robust process. Right, next document. So digging in a little further to some of these supporting documents, a shift towards parametric release is supported by part 1 in some of the language change. So the language for dosimetry has been simplified from an implied verbiage that dosimetry was mandatory for every batch release 2, language that states traceable dose measurements in conjunction with the monitoring of process variables shall be carried out at sufficient frequency to verify that the process is in a state of control. Again, this is paving the way for parametric release. The previous version implied that routine dosimetry was the primary evidence for product release, and the new version modifies this to where, if controlled and monitored, the physical placement of dosimeters on every single batch may no longer be the sole requirement for release. And moving on to C, the new version places heavier emphasis on process variables, such as for E-beam, beam current, scan width, and then also conveyor speed. Okay. Now, if these variables stay within a validated range, the dose is basically mathematically ensured, supporting the move toward parametric release. Next slide. All right, so talking about Part 4, 11137 Part 4, which started this by talking about process dose versus product dose. So D-MON, the monitoring dosimeter, as a process monitor. So it is acceptable to monitor a process where the maximum dosed product are not actually measured routinely, either directly or indirectly. It also talks about parametric trending. So parametric data trending, processing parameters are monitored as a function of time. The controlling software can interrupt an out-of-tolerance process, and it is possible to track combined dose critical parameters such as beam current and speed to calculate process variation, which can be monitored to ensure a state of control within a specified tolerance. So a range of monitoring doses are established that signify the process meets the established specification. So variability data taken from PQ, along with other components of uncertainty, are used to determine a minimax target for the routine monitoring dose. The variability at the monitoring location is then used to determine an acceptable range of doses, indicating a state of control and meeting process specification. Next slide, please. So moving on to talk about TIR 131 as a supporting document in parametric release for radiation. So again, this document is in draft. The scope of the document states parametric release is the declaration of adequacy of routine processing for a validated sterilization process based solely on measurement and documentation of physical process parameters. So this technical report presents the rationale and approach necessary for the implementation of parametric release for products sterilized by radiation. It also highlights the importance and interrelationship of other process factors such as load configuration and equipment performance that ultimately can influence the irradiation process. So parametric release for radiation sterilization requires a thorough knowledge and control of the irradiation parameters, and the release method requires consistent control and documentation of the sterilization process parameters. So also just wanting, to point out as a reminder that release based on dosimeter measurements is dosimetric release. It is not parametric release. So this guidance guidance document will clarify which parameters need to be controlled, monitored, and documented for the radiation type so that the product release can then be based on the results of the process being within the specified requirements to achieve sterility. All right, next slide. So finally, the irradiation panel document. This is called Released from an Electron Beam Irradiation Process based on Irradiator Parameters and Introductory Guidance. So the scope of this document states, this document describes a method of process control and release from an irradiation process using electron beams based on calculated dose values. This method is known as release based on irradiated parameters, or RBIP, and employs a combination of dose calculated using monitored irradiated variables and physical dose measurements. So an expansion of this method to cover X-ray and gamma irradiation will be published in subsequent documents. You can find this document, this guidance document on the Irradiation Panel website. All right, so moving on to talk about the status of Part 2. This document is still in draft. It went out as a committee draft for ballot in August of 25, and with a vote due in October of 25. These comments that were received, quite a few comments, were reviewed at the October ISO meeting in China. And then the rewrites addressing those comments are now complete for this draft. It'll be the DIS, the Draft International Standard. It won't make release for vote and comment in time for AMI meetings in March to review, to determine what comments would be forward as U.S. comments, but virtual meetings will be held to begin reviewing comments for the AMI comments. Next slide. So I wanted to just point out some of the significant modifications that are under review. Again, this document is still under review. Inclusion of all VD-max sterilization doses, so from 15 to 35 kilogray, are included. And as these are being included, it was necessary to combine some of the tables for VD-max. So that's another change. We also included the modified method 2 that was in the AMI TIR 40 document. So you'll want to take a look at that. That is includes reduced dose increments for the modified method 2, which makes it a little faster than the traditional method 2. There are a lot of additional guidance annexes. So these are informative guidance, including dose audit failure, limit of detection, alert and action levels, microbiological control and sample size, and the selection of the dose establishment method. There's also a new approach to SIP for bulk components, and also modifications regarding augmentations and how they're handled. So make sure when that comes out that you're reviewing that document and taking the opportunity to comment. Right, next slide. So moving on from radiation to talk a little bit about MedAccred and industry approach shifting the paradigm. So some of the things that we're working on right now is the changes that we've talked about in part 1 are being incorporated into the audit criteria, the MedAccred audit criteria, AC 8113/1. So we have made those updates. The next steps will be to ballot to the task group and then to ballot to the management council. They will go through a document change process, a holding period, and then finally release and use in MedAccred audits. Also, we have added sterilization related laboratory testing as a new audit criteria. It's AC 8113/3. It includes dose audits in establishment, test of sterility, bioburden, BI test, and bacterial endotoxin test. It also includes all of the general laboratory criteria necessary to be able to perform all those tests appropriately and according to the requirements and standards. We also have our first accredited laboratory, very excited about that. Pacific Biolabs was awarded certification at our industry roundtable in November that was held in DC, and Justin will have more on that. And then coming soon, we have a new training for MedAccred sterilization accreditation that will be coming out. Again, this is a training for the MedAccred process, the sterilization task group process, how that works, some of the questions that are in the audit criteria and evidence that is looked at. So be on the lookout for this being announced, and it is a one-day training that can be held either virtually, or if you have a group that we can do it in person. So more to come on that. Justin will be talking about the paradigm shift and our all-in industry saturation. We're trying to be everywhere that the industry is this year. And he'll talk about our new tiered subscription and give an industry roundtable update. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin.
All right, Kim, thank you so much. Yeah, that was awesome information. I've heard you talk about a lot of these changes previously, but learned even more today. But yeah, really honored to be here with you all to talk about the MedAccred program. More specifically, I know Kim shared a lot of updates happening in the radiation space. So this will be switching gears, but definitely related to radiation sterilization. So Kim mentioned MedAccred and some of the -1 updates that we're making to the MedAccred audit criteria. This is just a look at the full scope of sterility assurance related audits and accreditations that the MedAccred currently offers. You can see we do have a radiation section that covers gamma, E-beam, and X-ray. We have a core document in the MedAccred audit that covers ISO 13485 and regulatory requirements. But then we also have an ethylene oxide and, as Kim mentioned, a sterilization-related lab testing criteria that covers these elements below. And again, yeah, Kim shared that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We are growing this scope. Eventually we'll be adding, biocompatibility and other types of modalities here as well. So kind of backing up a little bit on what is MedAccred for those of you that might not be familiar. So we got two images on the screen here. On the left is current state for sterility assurance supplier oversight across the medtech ecosystem. So each medical device OEM or manufacturer is responsible for overseeing their critical suppliers. And in this, today's conversation, we're talking about sterilization or lab testing. And each of those manufacturers are performing their own individual oversight audits at their suppliers. And so there's a ton of inefficiency. You talk to any contract sterilizer out there, and they'll tell you that they're audited to death, right? They have entire teams dedicated to hosting customer audits, and sometimes multiple audits a day, definitely multiple audits a week and month. But many of those audits are performed by generalists who might not even know how to spell sterilization, let alone, understand the level of depth in the technology that Kim just shared, in the changes to the radiation standard. But what Kim and I are part of, and this is a larger medtech ecosystem movement, is moving to the right side of the screen here, where we are leveraging a more efficient and effective approach to supplier oversight, where the medical device companies, with contract sterilizer engagement and support as well, are developing a system that they can develop a very detailed audit criteria as a collective group, select subject matter expert auditors, and then go out and conduct a single audit at each contract sterilizer or lab testing facility, and then as a group determine if that individual manufacturing facility met the requirements that they set at the beginning. So we call this an industry managed approach to supplier oversight, and really the industry collaborates in a pre-competitive space. It's not, we're not talking about IP or confidential information. This is, ensuring that the standards, again, that Kim was sharing earlier, are being met by the contract sterilizers and labs, and ensuring ultimately, product quality and patient safety outcomes in the end. So we're moving from a decentralized to a centralized paradigm. And what makes this approach different, I touched on some of these, but the MedAccred audit and approach is very technical in nature. So I know you're all familiar with ISO 1345 and 9001, and those are required and essential to final product quality, but they really cover only a shallow level of depth when we're talking about technical rigor. And that's where MedAccred comes in, and we do a kind of inch wide and mile deep look at a contract sterilizer's processes. It's interesting, we've conducted a few panel discussions over the last weeks and months, and we were just at MD&M West last week in Anaheim, California, and we hosted a panel discussion with a number of contract sterilizers. And NextBeam, they're an e-beam contract sterilizer. Their CEO mentioned that in a typical customer audit, those auditors are looking at maybe around 40 to 50 documents, to kind of review and dive into, and they shared that in MedAccred audit they're looking at around 240 to 250 Kim documents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 5x what an auditee would be looking at, during a regular customer audit versus MedAccred. So from a technical rigor perspective, it's very in-depth, and we're really, diving into the nitty-gritty details. I also mentioned that we're using SME auditors, so it's Medtronic and Boston Sci and W.L. Gore and Zimmer Biomet. It's their companies that are actually interviewing and selecting the auditors that are going out and conducting these MedAccred audits. And those auditors, are folks with levels of experience and expertise like Kim, 20, 30 years of experience in the sterility assurance industry. They've been on, in many facilities, they've audited themselves, et cetera. So very qualified auditors are conducting these audits. Another unique aspect of the MedAccred program is that the whole process is owned by industry. So Kim and I work for MedAccred, which is part of an organization called the Performance Review Institute, which is a not-for-profit trade association. So we really, our organization allows industry to collaborate in a pre-competitive safe space. And so it's the OEMs that actually own all the decisions of the program. So they're deciding what goes into that final audit criteria. They decide which auditors are going to audit for the program. And then again, once the audit package comes to that group of OEMs, they vote on the accreditation decision. So the accreditation decision has been made by them, and is ultimately up to them. And again, Kim and I facilitate that whole process, and we have dozens of staff members behind us as well that are making sure everything is running smoothly. Last point I'll make on this is around sustainability. So again, imagine a couple of dozen audits a year at a single facility, cut down to one or two, right? Imagine the travel and cost savings on just travel alone, and then the time required for each of those individual auditors from the OEMs to go and audit a single facility, and then the time required from the auditee to host those audits. So you can, I think the carbon emissions and all the rest of those savings become pretty obvious when you can see just a more efficient approach to oversight. So those are the big points. Kim was talking about kind of updates with the MedAccred program. Just last year, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium published a report following a very in-depth pilot on the Sterility Assurance Oversight Program that we're talking about here. And so the recommendations that came out of that report after doing, Kim, I think we did nine sterilization audits at 9 different contract sterilizer locations. FDA observed 8 of 9 of those audits, and they had, I think, more than 10 different FDA inspectors participate in those 8 audits. And then OEMs, medical device companies and contract sterilizers also participated in kind of the implementation of that pilot. So once that pilot had been completed, these were the recommendations that were included in that report. And yeah, if you get a minute, please, take a look. You can go to the MDIC website or the MedAccred website and download the report. But they found that the MedAccred audit and accreditation program is robust and comprehensive concerning the covered sterilization processes. So those were the ones I shared a few slides earlier, combined with a thorough evaluation of the QMS requirements. And then also, the annual MedAccred sterilization audits provide sustained oversight and adequate information that can be leveraged for regulatory purposes by the medical technology industry and regulators. So strong recommendation to regulators, and FDA is supportive of this approach. Also, notified bodies are becoming more and more aware of MedAccred and supportive as well, and just the interest and support from not only the manufacturers but from the regulators has been very encouraging. I think I wanted to mention last year, at the end of the year, we brought industry together. We had over 20 organizations, OEMs, contract sterilizers, FDA, notified bodies, industry associations. IIA was there, Amy was represented, and really the consensus around the table was this approach to sterility assurance supplier oversight is the path forward for the industry, right? Resources are always constrained, right? Particularly technical resources. When you talk to these medical device companies and contract sterilizers, they're struggling to get the technical talent to provide the level of oversight needed at their critical suppliers. So this approach really ensures that they get that technical deep dive, at each of their suppliers on an annual or 18-month frequency. But the consensus at the table last November, we met in Washington, D.C., was yes, we need to move forward with this approach. And you can see it's a bit of an eye chart on the right hand side here, but we had dozens, around 24 organizations come together and agree this is the next step forward. So what we're working on now is increasing the number of OEMs who are leveraging the program, because the more OEMs able to use it, the fewer audits that the suppliers receive, and also at the same time growing the number of suppliers who are accredited, so that the OEMs have more audits to leverage themselves. So we're kind of building both of those sides of the equation simultaneously, while at the same time continue to increase regulatory and notified body support for this, enhancing our messaging, really making sure that it's the decision makers at these companies that really understand the value proposition, right? This is a lower cost option that will give you better quality and reduce risk to your critical suppliers and to your operations. And then lastly, our objective, and one of the reasons why we're here with you today, and again, really appreciate everyone joining us, is growing the ecosystem knowledge, awareness, and support for this approach, right? Yeah, imagine just a few dozen companies buying into this. Yeah, that's great, but until we get to hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are leveraging this, we haven't fully realized the value proposition. So that's where Kim and I are really, working to move industry to start adopting this as, okay, yes, ISO 1345 is essential, and of course, with the new QMSR, of course, everyone is aligned on that. But what's missing is the technical deep dive, and that's where MedAccred comes in. So just a few more slides here, and then we'll open up for Q&A, but really a call to action. And I know, there looks like there are around 100 different folks on the call here, and I'm sure you represent lots of different parts of the industry. But for our OEMs and contract manufacturers out there, we want you to join us as what we call subscribers. So you're making the decisions, you're leveraging the audits to supplement or support your critical supplier oversight. And then for the contract sterilizers and testing labs, join as accredited suppliers and start leveraging that audit to supplement and support your customer audits, right? And again, help improve your processes and capabilities as well. And then if you're a regulator, association, or other ecosystem stakeholder, there's opportunities to jump in and participate as well. Similar to an AMI or ASTM, we are continuously developing and refining our audit criteria, and always, have some new ones in the waiting in the wings to develop. So we need subject matter experts and interested parties to be involved in those discussions. So if you're one of those individuals or companies, yeah, please get involved. This is just a couple of, we'll make sure you get these slides at the end, but this really shows, depending on where you sit in the industry, large OEM, small OEM, contract manufacturer, or other, you have access and decision-making power within the MedAccred program. And yeah, I won't get into all the details there. And then also we have different pricing options as well. This is, again, we're not for profit, so it's really just making sure our costs are covered, similar to, I'm sure, IIA. But if you just want to leverage MedAccred, you're a large OEM, you want to leverage the MedAccred audit for your contract sterilizers, you could jump in at $15,000. But also want to just mention that MedAccred covers many additional processes beyond just sterilization, injection molding, sterile packaging, SMT, cable and wire harness, heat treating, welding, and these we continue to add new processes there as well. So I think last slide before go to Q&A, but yeah, what we're doing now is really identifying those suppliers and OEMs that are going to be joining the next phase of the program. So we're continuing to build there, enhancing our messaging, communications, and just ecosystem awareness of MedAccred. We're going to be at AMI Nexus. Would love to connect with anyone here who's going to be there. Also planning to be at the IIA China Roadshow at the end of April. So also would love to connect with folks there as well. And then I talked about the roundtable meeting we had in Washington, D.C. last November, we're planning a round two, I think at the end of Q2 2026. So May, June timeframe, bringing industry back together and kind of just assessing current status and where we're heading next. So hopefully that was clear, and I think at this point I'll maybe hand it over to Arthur to moderate any questions, or I would love to just dig into anything more that folks want to learn about.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Kim. A quick question: when you're doing your audits, do you look at training plans, skills, and competencies of those responsible for radiation sterilization validations?
Yes. So as Justin said, we do include a full QMS audit as part of the sterilization audit. And within that, training, yes, is a big part of it. And so we will look at a large sample size. MedAccred, that's one thing everybody likes. The FDA liked that we have pretty large sample sizes. And so we will dig into their training and look at how operators were trained. Even if they've been there for a lot of years, how are they maintaining that knowledge? And then also look at their systems that keep up with training. And so I'll pick out a material handler or a quality technician and say, show me that person has the most current training on whatever it is that they're doing. So we do that. And then just making sure that they've defined through some way, a matrix, or, they've defined what competency is required.
Okay. Another question in terms of auditors themselves. Do auditors have to go through some sort of program to demonstrate because you talk about a technical audit, do auditors have to go through any sort of program to demonstrate their technical competencies in relation to their understanding of the implementation of the requirements of the standards or guidance documents?
So what we do with auditors, they have to first go into a system and answer some questions about their technical knowledge with the standards and their background. If that passes, then it moves to the next level where we begin interviewing, and interviews are conducted by at least 3 of the OEM sterilization task group members. So the sterilization task group is made up of SMEs from the OEMs in sterilization. And they, I don't know if you call it a program, but the questions that some of these SMEs ask the auditors will quickly weed out anyone that doesn't know what they're doing, hasn't had hands-on experience in sterilization. If they've just been exposed, maybe worked in a facility that had sterilization or had sterile product but didn't have anything to do with it really, then that quickly comes to light. So additionally, we look for how an auditor is maintaining their knowledge and SME status. We encourage them to get involved in whether it's part of ISO or AMI, and be involved in what's going on with the standards so they stay up to date. But even so, when there's a change to the audit criteria in order to improve the criteria or to continue to stay up with the changes in standards, then we put them through a training to make sure that they understand what those changes mean for the audit criteria.
Yeah, great, Kim. And I would just add that MDIC pilot report that I mentioned earlier, that was a huge part of the pilot, ensuring that FDA and the industry were confident in our approach to vetting our auditors and training them, and continuous improvement and continuous training of those auditors as well. So I think that's well documented in that report. So again, if we can, if you get some time to look at that, should give you some more insight.
Okay, one more question. There's a big talk about, we're talking about AI and the use of AI in radiation processing. When you go to the standards meetings, are there any discussions on how this will be approached in terms of regulations and how they will be adopted within the regulatory space?
So I think those discussions, Arthur, are just starting to happen now. And as a matter of fact, at Amy Nexus, I know it's on the agenda. So it'll be interesting to see what all is said at that. Well, I'll definitely be there at Amy Nexus but yeah, I mean, they're really just starting to have those discussions in terms of how it's going to impact the standards for radiation or standards for any of the other modalities or any micro or whatever it may be.
Okay. That's all we have time for today. A special thank you to our presenters for taking the time to be with us and provide their insights into today's topic. Thank you to everyone watching for participating in today's webinar. The recording of this webinar will be circulated shortly, as will the follow-up to any QA sessions. Contact information for myself and our presenters will shortly be shown on screen, and the webinar will be officially ended in a few minutes. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.